I've always had a passion for being around and learning about animals. When I was younger, going to zoos and animal parks was always a part of my life. I wanted to share my passion with family and friends, so I started working with people that loved animals as much as I did, and my YouTube channel was born.
Welcome back to my animal education series. Today I'm here with Annie at World Bird Sanctuary. Hello.
Hi!
Who do we have here behind us?
This is Osiris, and Osiris is an Egyptian vulture.
So this is quite a cool looking species of vulture, so where can you find them?
Yeah, so you can find the Egyptian vulture obviously in Egypt, right? Throughout northern Africa. You can also find them in southwestern Europe and in parts of India as well.
And how does this coloration help them in the wild?
Yeah, so their coloration is really bright, and probably it is sexual selection. So these birds, really bright white to attract mates, really cool. But there's something else really cool about the Egyptian vulture's plumage. You know, where they're found, they're in really dry areas with a lot of dust. So these birds will actually take dust baths to improve their feather quality, and they can actually turn like a rust brown, a rust orange, or even red because they coat themselves in that dust. So it's really cool. Obviously, here in Missouri, we don't have red dust for Osiris to take dust baths in, but if we did, we might see that really bright red coloration.
Maybe someday they'll get an opportunity for that.
Yes, maybe someday.
Just to keep the animal clean and presentable, maybe.
Yes.
Not. So is this bird endangered at all?
Yes, so they are endangered, particularly in India, where one of the subspecies is found. They are experiencing a vulture crisis, and they have lost about 90% of their vultures.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of vultures.
It's really bad. So it's because of poisoning with pharmaceuticals. So the farmers out in India, when their cows die, they like to let them kind of drop and lay in the field so that the vultures can come and eat, and they're feeding the vultures. But they started using a medication called diclofenac, which they didn't realize was a toxin for the vultures. So all those vultures started getting poisoned, and they started dying before they were able to realize that there was a problem. So huge problem for them over in India with that crisis.
Are there any solutions for this so far besides just stop putting the drugs out there?
So obviously all of those folks who live out in India, they don't want their vultures to be gone. They love their vultures, and vultures help take care of us. They help keep the environment clean. So when they lost all of those vultures, they saw a huge spike in rabies, which are spread by wild dogs who kind of moved in when the vultures disappeared. And they have seen a huge spike in other illnesses that can be spread through, dirty carcasses laying around. So obviously they're very motivated to bring those vultures back. So they have started a lot of captive breeding efforts in India. They've also worked hard to get diclofenac, that medication, banned, so farmers can't use it in their cows, which was causing the problem. And they're really focusing on bringing those vultures back because it's estimated that it's costing the Indian government something like $20 billion a year, in US dollars, to lose their vultures. It's a huge problem.
That's a lot of money, too.
That's a lot of money.
Just by one, kind of innocent mistake.
Exactly.
They didn't know it was going to happen, but
exactly.
It just causes huge waterfall effect.
It is. And, that's kind of the story in a lot of conservation issues, like DDT. We thought this was this great thing, we were helping people out, and then it turns out it had this ripple effect that we didn't know about. So it's all very connected.
So, obviously here at World Bird Sanctuary, you guys are a rehabilitation center,
Yes.
and you educate people with birds
Yes.
of prey. So, how did you get Osiris here?
Yes, so Osiris did not come in as a wild bird. Osiris actually hatched here 20 years ago, and Osiris was the very first Egyptian vulture that we hatched here at World Bird Sanctuary, so that's pretty cool. His parents were part of a captive breeding program, and Osiris, actually, we're looking to get him a girlfriend so he can be part of those efforts to help those birds out in the wild with their population. So, fingers crossed that sometime soon Osiris will be getting a lady. They can have some babies. So he's here for conservation purposes.
So what do these birds eat out in the wild? Well, obviously they're vultures, so they probably scavenge.
They do. They scavenge quite a bit. They love to get in there, pick all the meat off the carcass. Yummy, yummy. But they also love to eat eggs. And the Egyptian vulture is really unique, not just in the vulture world, but in the whole bird world, because not many birds use tools. When we think of tool use, we think a lot of primates, humans obviously, but vultures, these Egyptian vultures will use tools. So they do this really cool thing where they find an egg, they're like, yeah, I want to eat this egg. And then they go and they find a pebble, and they like a really like smooth, round pebble. And the vulture will pick it up and he'll tap it on the egg with his beak until it cracks open, and then they eat up all that delicious egg.
Wow, that's really smart of them.
It is really smart. It's so smart. And they actually will do this under human care as well. Birds, Egyptian vultures who've been raised by humans, they will still do this behavior. So it's an innate behavior. It's not something they had to be taught. And they also have been observed to use sticks to spin wool into like a ball to put in their nests, which is really cool. Yeah.
Have you observed any like really intelligent behavior like that here?
Yes, so Osiris is a retired educational bird. So Osiris actually used to crack open eggs on stage in front of audiences to show off that really cool tool behavior. And he did a little bit of flying as well. But also our vultures, a lot of times, they need a higher level of enrichment than some of our other birds. So a lot of times we'll give our vultures like, you know, feeding puzzles to figure out, you know, how to get their food out to keep their brains active, because they are really smart.
And with a smart animal, kind of like with primates and stuff at zoos, you have to give them a lot of enrichment to kind of keep them occupied.
Oh, absolutely. You absolutely do.
So, like with puzzles and stuff, like what other enrichment do you do to help them out?
Yeah, so our vultures, we sometimes like to carcass feed, which I think is one of the coolest enrichments you can do with a vulture, which is literally exactly what it sounds like. You know, you bring in a carcass, you put it in the enclosure, and you let the vulture, you know, pick the meat off of the bones, like clean the carcass off, basically, and it does a few things for the vulture. One, it stimulates their, you know, natural behaviors of the picking and the ripping and the sticking the head inside, you know, different things. It also is really good for them because they get to gorge themselves on food, which is something vultures do out in the wild. They'll actually eat so much that they're too heavy to fly. So by giving them a carcass, we're letting him kind of do that behavior of just like eating a bunch of food and then fasting himself for a little bit. And we also think it can be something really interesting for the public to see. Not everyone agrees with that, so you know, if we ever carcass feed on display, we give a nice warning to anyone walking that direction. But I think that's one of the best kinds of enrichment you can give a vulture.
Because it's completely natural for them. That's what
Exactly.
they would do out in the wild.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, anything we can kind of do to help them in captivity is definitely good for like their brain and
Oh,
like,
yeah.
also for like, their muscles, like tearing. And probably it's great exercise, and then he makes himself really fat.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So what's one of your favorite things about this vulture?
I don't know. Probably my favorite thing about the Egyptian vulture is how tied into Egyptian culture this bird is. So the Egyptian vulture also is known as the pharaoh's chicken, and it is really intertwined with royalty. So a lot of the pharaohs viewed this bird as a very important bird, as a sacred bird, and ancient Egyptians associated this bird with Isis, the god of life and fertility, and she was kind of, you know, really important goddess to them. So a lot of folks in ancient Egypt thought that this was an immortal bird, a bird who brought life and brought, you know, good, positive things because it was so closely associated with that goddess Isis, which I just think is really interesting and cool.
So what conservation efforts are in Egypt with this bird since it's so close to the royalty?
Yeah, so they're going to be doing some similar things with captive breeding, just watching out for the birds overall. You know, a lot of the issues with our vultures, kind of everywhere, is accidental poisoning, like we talked about with the diclofenac. We see a different sort of accidental poisoning going on in parts of Africa. So in a lot of parts of Africa, folks will actually poison carcasses in order to get rid of like hyenas and things that are really dangerous around human settlements. But obviously, you know, if you put poison on a carcass, you can't just say, okay, now only hyenas are going to come to it.
Anything that can't eat it will eat it.
Exactly. So that can be an issue. And you also see, you know, problems with like gunshots, getting tangled up in like wire, things like that, just from around, you know, human areas. So a lot of conservation efforts are focused on reducing those sorts of things. And then of course rehabilitation, right? Super important. Obviously we don't get them in here in Missouri, but those sorts of things are going to help out the vulture anywhere you go, but also in Africa and Egypt where they're from.
And here at World Bird, you have Osiris as an educational animal,
Yes.
so he gets to tell people the story of the Egyptian vulture.
Exactly, exactly. So he's doing lots of important work here.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about Osiris and Egyptian vultures as a whole.
Oh, of course. Super fun.
And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Instagram, @ColeShirk. As always, I'll see you next week.